Question: when driving on a two-lane road and another vehicle is approaching from the opposite direction, you must. Question: what should you do if you are driving and begin to feel fatigued? Question: when you see a merge sign on the road, you must. Question: when approaching a pedestrian crossing where pedestrians are waiting, you must. Question: when driving in foggy conditions, you should use. Question: when driving at night, how can you reduce glare from oncoming headlights? Question: what should you do when an emergency vehicle with flashing lights approaches? Question: if you are approaching a roundabout, you must. Question: when driving in windy conditions, you should. Question: if you are driving and suddenly one of your tires blows out, you should. Question: when parking uphill with a curb, you should turn your front wheels. Question: if your headlights fail at night, you should. Question: when merging onto a freeway, you should. Question: if another driver is tailgating you, following too closely, you should. Question: when driving downhill for a long distance, you should. Question: what should you do when approaching a school zone with children present? Question: when driving in heavy rain and your car begins to skid, you should. Question: if you see flashing red lights at a railroad crossing, you must. Question: what should you do if you approach a traffic signal that is not working, completely dark? Question: at an uncontrolled intersection, no signs or signals, who has the right of way? Question: when driving in a school zone while children are present, you must. Question: what should you do before entering a roundabout? Question: when driving down a steep hill, what should you do? Question: what does a flashing yellow traffic light mean? Question: what should you do if your brakes fail while driving? Question: what should you do if the traffic light turns green while pedestrians are still crossing? Question: what should you do if the traffic light turns green while pedestrians are still crossing? Question: before changing lanes, you should always. Question: what does a solid yellow line on your side of the road mean? Question: when driving in a construction zone, you should. Question: what must you do when you hear a siren or see flashing lights from an emergency vehicle? Question: when are you allowed to turn right at a red traffic light? Question: what should you do when approaching a flashing red traffic light? Question: when you see a pedestrian with a white cane at a crosswalk, you must. Question: what should you do if you miss your exit on the highway? Question: when driving in rain on a wet road, it's important to know how to prevent hydroplaning? Question: when driving in fog, what lights should you use? Question: when must you use your headlights? Question: what should you do when approaching a yellow traffic light? Question: at an intersection with a stop sign, when should you proceed? Question: what should you do when approaching a stop sign? Question: when should you use your headlights? Question: when passing another vehicle, is it safe to exceed the speed limit? Question: what is the first thing you should do if your vehicle starts to skid? Question: what should you do if your brakes fail while driving? Question: when driving downhill for a long distance, how should you control your speed? Question: when should you use your turn signals? Question: when driving at night, how can you reduce the glare from oncoming headlights? Question: if you are approaching a railroad crossing with flashing red lights and lowered gates, what should you do? Question: when approaching a school bus stopped with flashing red lights, what must you do? Question: when driving in fog, what lights should you use? Question: what does a double solid yellow line mean? Question: what does a red traffic light mean? Question: what should you do when you hear a siren or see emergency vehicle lights behind you? Question: what does a broken white line on the road indicate? Question: what does a flashing yellow traffic light mean? Question: when are you allowed to turn right at a red traffic light? Question: what does a solid yellow line on your side of the road mean? Question: what should you do if you see a school bus stop with its red lights flashing? Question: when passing another vehicle, is it safe to exceed the speed limit?